my shelves, but I've been moving and shaking and rearranging, and anyways, haven't had time to put them back on their shelves because I'm not quite sure how things are going to stay. But in the meantime, I am bringing to you Second Chance Summer by Morgan Matsn today. If you're not familiar with Morgan Matsn, she's very YA. I cannot tell you, actually let me sit back. The one thing that hasn't changed is the fact that this chair is way down here and my stand is way up here. So one of these days I will get my act together. As I said, Morgan Matsn is very YA. I think I've read a couple other of her books, and I've always kind of been on the fence, but I remember loving Second Chance Summer when I first read it. Can't tell you when that was. I want to say 5, 6, 7 years ago. I think it was before I started getting into audiobooks, because I cannot find this at any of my libraries. And then I did not have it purchased as an ebook, but I remembered loving this book. I thought it was extremely impactful. And so even though I wasn't a huge fan of her other stuff, I thought it was a little bit juvenile. I said, it's summertime. I want a summer read. Let's do Second Chance Summer. And I'm a little disappointed to report that it lost some of its magic. I think for me, a huge portion of that was the storytelling, the choices she made. For one, it was set in the past tense. I know that's kind of like the thing to do because the writing community shuns first person present. But the thing that Matson would do is it was set in the past tense, and then she would have flashbacks, which I didn't mind. I liked them. I thought they were necessary to the story. But within her present day past tense, she would gloss over events only to then recap them, like revisit them. And I thought it was extremely ineffective. I would have preferred, like, sometimes I thought it was great the way she would end the chapter. It was extremely effective. But then when she'd pick up with the next chapter, she would then have to recap the stuff we missed, because the stuff we missed was important, like a 4th of July party. Really important to know what happened at this 4th of July party, but since we didn't actually experience it in the preceding chapter, she would have to go back and throw us into memory of it, and it slowed things down. And then, so the whole book, let's actually get into the plot, and then I will talk about the other things. Second Chance Summer is about this young teenager named Taylor, whose dad has been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and he only has a couple months to live. He decides that he wants his family to go back to their summer house up in the Poconos, in which they haven't visited in about 5 years, to sort of spend this final summer together as a family. The family's not particularly tight-knit, but this is what he wants, so that's what they're gonna do. But Taylor does not want to go back. We don't quite know why. We know she did something terrible regarding her best friend Lucy and her boyfriend Henry. That's like the whole, well, not the whole, like the majority of the novel is getting to the heart of that matter. Whereas the rest of the novel is about her family coming to terms with the fact that their patriarch is dying. So we get to the Poconos. We are immediately thrown into the dynamics of her family and the way that she doesn't really get along with her siblings. There's no love lost there, but Sister Gelsey, which I'm gonna stop here and say, I remember enjoying this name when I first read the book because I thought it was really unique. And then this time around, I felt like Matson was trying too hard to be cool. However, eventually she explains that Gelsey is the name of a famous ballerina. Gelsey does ballet. Their mother had done ballet, so I can accept it. But there came a certain point when I heard that word enough that I was like, Gelsey. And so it's probably just one of those things when you hear a word too many times and it stops making sense. So it's not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just something I wanted to tangent into because we know I like to tangent. We get to the Poconos and they run into this dog hanging out at their house, and the brother is terrified of it, and Taylor has to get out and like shoo this dog away, and we continue to encounter this dog, only to learn that the dog keeps showing up their house because the people who had been renting their house had bought the dog only to leave the dog when they left for the rest of the year. So yeah, over the course of the book, they end up adopting this dog, and then the brother uses the dog. His name is Warren. He uses the dog, whose name is Murphy, to sort of like court the vet. And that was a situation unto itself that I thought was a little weird. Yes, so the first day they're in the Poconos, Taylor runs into Henry and he cold shoulders her, and she's like, I deserve that, which I gotta admit, Taylor's good at owning her faults. So I liked that she knew she was at fault for whatever happened, and she kind of deserved whatever treatment she was going to get from Lucy and Henry. We learn that Henry is now a full-time resident. I think it's Lake Charles, or maybe Lake Charles is Louisiana, from Mount Goddard. Oh, I should remember this, but I'm so tired. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Anyways, and so we're like, what happened? Because he used to be a summer kid too, and then we learned that his mother had left them, I think the same summer, 5 years prior, that Taylor had cut and run. Lucy re-enters the picture, and what we eventually learn, and this is something I don't remember being so disappointed about my first time through, the big secret is that 5 years prior, Lucy's parents had been getting a divorce. She wasn't able to spend the entire summer there. So they're on the phone one day, and Lucy's like, I have a crush. And Taylor, who had just gone on her first date with Henry, is like, oh, me too. I can't wait to tell you about what's going on. Turns out they both like Henry. And Taylor, who has this habit of running away, was like, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know how to tell my best friend that I'm dating her crush. And then she keeps asking me about how Henry feels about her, and I can't ask him because it's so awkward. At some point during the summer, Lucy comes back. They're at the pool. Henry shows up, and then Lucy puts the pieces together that Taylor and Henry are together, and Taylor is so incapable of handling the situation that she leaves. She encounters her dad, who is coming, or he's leaving their summer house for the week, and she's like, can I just go home with you? And then she never talks to Henry or Lucy for the next 5 years, and that's the big secret. Given how big she makes this out to be, I expected something more. I can understand where it came from and why this was the problem and why it was so significant to her, because that is a running theme as to she runs away from her problems. But I thought that the buildup deserved something a bit more intensive, you know? Anyways, we get through the novel. Taylor's dad ends up dying at the end. That, I think, was the strength of the novel, was those moments in which we got to spend with her and her dad and the family. And I do remember being extremely emotional over the loss of her dad. And then this time, I didn't feel emotional so much as let down, because we didn't actually spend that much time with her dad. I thought that was a huge failing, considering this novel was all about the family celebrating the time that he had left in reacquainting themselves as a family. Yet what we get is Taylor being like, oh, I did this with my dad, rather than us seeing her. Like, she and her dad would go to a diner and have breakfast. This is a really nice depiction of his deterioration, which I thought, again, we could have used more of, because over the course of the novel, he eats less and less, and he looks sicker and sicker and thinner and all that good stuff. But in this first breakfast, I'm expecting us to see them start that bond, because she was always a daddy's girl. He was always the one that she would go to. Didn't have a great relationship with her mother. Gelsey was the mother's favorite, but she felt like she had a connection to her dad. But then she realizes she doesn't actually know anything about him, and she can't even remember the last time she told him she loved him. I was expecting them to get to this breakfast, and things are a little bit awkward, a little bit stilted, because they're alone and they have nothing to talk about, because they never talk about anything, because he used to be a workaholic. They're eating, she's looking at her menu, and she notices that there are these questions, like these icebreaker questions. And so I'm thinking, all right, here we go. We're gonna start to get to know the dad a little bit, because Taylor realizes that she needs to get to know her dad a little bit. But we don't see that. All we are told is that they do go through the questions. From then on, we're continually told that they have continued their breakfast and they continue these icebreaker questions, but we don't actually get to see any of it. And I would have been fine with that if we'd at least gotten that first scene out of the way where she and her dad start the bond. But it's stuff like that where we approach the bond, but we don't actually get to see the bond, and therefore the constant updates as to his deterioration meant a little less, like they were just a little less effective, because it was more like we gotta focus on the romance with Henry, the reconciliation amongst Taylor and her friends, and then the dad is just the sideline, where I felt like the dad was the headline, you know, not the sideline or the byline, because he was the whole reason they were there. So I definitely lacked the emotional connection that I'd gotten the first time that I read the book, and it chalked up a lot to that. A lot due to the fact that, one, we didn't see the family bonding, so the whole reason going to the Poconos was moot. And then we would get through a scene only to have to repeat some of the scene that we didn't get to see, but it felt like it was slowing the novel down, like one of those parachutes, like, I forget exactly, because it's 1:30 in the morning, what exactly the sport is, but you know, like you're going really fast and then you use the parachute to slow your momentum. It was kind of like that. And so it's not that I minded the scenes, because I felt like we did need that information, those insights, but it would have been more effective had Matson done it in time and place versus going backwards, because then we would have to return to the present, and it was a little too much to be coherent. I kept wondering, okay, so if I'm not getting enough of this, what could we have sacrificed so that I could have gotten more of this? And honestly, I didn't think that Matson tried to do too much in the novel. She really only had 3 main plot lines, well, 4-ish. We have her friendships that she has to reconcile, her re-burgeoning relationship with Henry, which actually I needed to touch on that, and then her dad's death, and then that kind of 4th one is just the family dynamics. And they were all pretty important. So then it occurred to me that perhaps the problem was the book needed to be longer so that she could fit all of these elements in appropriately. So a little bit of the writing could have improved the impact of the novel, and then, yeah, maybe expanding the length of the novel so that we could have had more of the heartbreaking stuff. But as for Henry, this metaphor of Taylor running away from her problem, the personification of her running away from her problems, I kind of liked, I kind of didn't like. at some point it felt kind of cliched. As I said, she does get, she fixes things with Henry and Lucy, which I thought, I don't know if I found it entirely believable. Granted, they were what, 12 when she dissed them, and then they're 17 when she reappears. So hopefully this has just come because they've all matured a little bit, and over the course of time they've been able to think about the reality behind the situation. Because yeah, she just like pieces out at the pool and never talks to them for 5 years. So I would be like, what in the world just happened there? But when she re-encounters Henry, he basically cold shoulders her. But then she continues to run into him, so he warms up to her. But it's not until she re-encounters Lucy, because she gets a summer job at the snack shack, like, at the beach where people come to get their food. And she has to spend all this time with Lucy. And then at one point, Lucy drunk calls her. She goes to get Lucy, not realizing that maybe bringing a bike wasn't the best idea, that she should have actually driven. However, she didn't want people to know she was sneaking out at 2 a.m, so she took the bike. They have this encounter, and Taylor's like, dude, I'm sorry. Like, I'm really, really sorry. And that's all it took for Lucy to forgive her. And I had a hard time swallowing that. And then it was kind of the same thing with Henry, because now that Lucy and Taylor have repaired their friendship, Taylor is saying, okay, well, now I really need to fix things with Henry. So she approaches him and she's just like, I think we should be friends. And he essentially, to me, he's like, I kind of thought we were friends, but I guess not. So, all right. And then the next thing I know, they're making out and hugging and kissing and loving and squeezing. And I'm like, that didn't take long at all. They have this beautiful romance, only for her dad to decline. She sits back and her flight response kicks in. And she, in her martyred state, is like, okay, I can't be with Henry because I know Henry is going to feel really bad and he's just going to want to cater to me and make sure that I'm okay and this and that and the other, and I simply cannot handle that. I do not want him to put me first, so and then I don't want him to wait for me, so I'm just gonna break up with him. She goes to break up with him, and he's basically like, why? And to her credit, she doesn't lie. She doesn't beat around the bush. She doesn't exactly tell the truth, but she doesn't lie. She's like, I just don't think it's a good time right now. I have too much going on, and I don't know if she actually said this, like, I don't want you to wait for me. And he's basically like, well, that's my choice, isn't it? Like, don't take my choice away from me. But then what I really loved is how he goes, but what about Lucy? Are you cutting her out? Because that was the thing that I thought was really strange, was not only was she breaking up with him, but she, because she likes him so much, which it's true to form for a teenager, she was like, I can't have anything to do with you. And then to his immense credit, he's like, so are you cutting Lucy out entirely as well? And of course she says no. And so he's like, well then what's the difference? Like, why can I not be here for you? Like, it's my choice. If I want to be here for you, I'm going to be here for you. And of course she just shuts it down. And so I was just like, I don't know. I really disliked the way she handled it. Even though it was true to character, I thought it could have had more tension to it. I thought it could have felt less selfish and more selfless. But that's what we got. And that's sort of how I feel the whole entire novel went, where it could have been a little bit deeper. We could have had a little bit more. But that goes back to Morgan Matsn as a whole. Is that going to stop me from reading more of her books? Absolutely not. I think I actually have one or two in my queue. But yeah, I don't expect a lot. although this reminds me in a very offhand way, don't ask me how or the why my brain connects things the way it does. Warren, her Taylor's brother, and then the dog and the girlfriend. So I thought this was kind of strange because Warren, very socially awkward, extremely smart, super snobby about schools and intelligence. They take the dog to the vet just to figure out who its owner is. Warren automatically crushes on the vet tech Wendy, which I thought it was cool. Like I enjoyed his evolution. I enjoyed him being fleshed out as more than just like the stereotypical smart brother who doesn't get along with his sister and blah blah blah. But then I thought it was just really strange the way that he would pursue Wendy, because for a guy who doesn't know how to talk to a girl, he's being awfully bold. I mean, granted, it was kind of clever the way he would do it. He would spill things on the dog so that the dog had to go get groomed. But to me, I kind of expected Wendy to put these pieces together. Like, why is this dude constantly here? And Taylor plays matchmaker and gets them together, and it turns out Wendy is the perfect complement to Warren. And I was like, what? Because she seemed so normal, and then she's not really. She's just not. And so then they have this great relationship, this communicative relationship that Taylor cannot seem to find with Henry. And I was just like, so for a guy like Warren to have, like, this is a first girl that he's ever shown interest in, period, then to have this really healthy relationship. Because then another thing Taylor can't do is talk about her dad's problems with her friends, particularly Henry. Yet Warren has no problem doing it. But he, can't actually hold a regular conversation with normal people. So I thought the relationship between him and Wendy was a little strange, a little hard to swallow, but whatever. I do want to clarify that it's not a bad book. I just found it wasn't what I remembered, and it wasn't what I'd hoped, and it could have been better. I would recommend it for teenagers. Granted, the first time I read it, I wasn't a teenager. I think I was probably 24, 25. For people who like deep writing and who like connectivity and who like to get into the meat of serious issues, this book's not gonna do it. Because then we also get this late introduction of Taylor's grandfather, who is extremely stoic. He's ex-military, he has this posture, he doesn't talk a lot, he feels really judgmental, and then he doesn't get along with his son. However, he wants to be there while his son is in hospice care. He wants to be there at the end. And I was just like, we could have had a little bit more of him before now. The only thing we get is a passing mention of how they don't have much to do with him and how Taylor is not that comfortable around him. Then it's like, but he loves his son enough to not talk to him on a regular basis, but then to insist upon being there while his son is dying. I know that sounds really harsh. I think it's great that the grandfather was like, I don't really care what kind of relationship I have with my son. I love him this much that I want to be there at the end. And Taylor realizes he's not such a bad guy. And again, I like that, except it kind of came in a little too late without any preface. So yeah, there's just a lot of good stuff that could have been done bigger and better and more emotionally connected. Anyways, I know there's a ton that I'm glossing over. I really didn't give you the usual detailed rundown, but as I said, it is now 1:45 in the morning and I need to go to bed, but I wanted to get this book out of the way before I forgot everything. And I had just been so busy, plus I already had my makeup on because I've been at work, and so I was just like, I gotta get this book done. It was actually supposed to be done last week, but things were happening and I could not access my space, which kind of, goes as to why my bookshelves are empty. Anyways, if you have any questions about this book, just ask, and since it's so fresh on my mind, no doubt I can give you the information you're looking for. As of right now, I do still have that copy of Alexandra Bracken's Lore that I am giving away. So all you gotta do, like, subscribe, comment. Initially, it had just been about my review of Lore, but any review will do, anything that proves that you're out there and you're listening. Tell me if you like giveaways, what you like for giveaways, and yeah, we'll see what I can do. So I'll see you next week because I've got good stuff in store for you. Bye.